Hello and welcome. You're watching Race to Power. My name is Mohammed Saleh, and on the show today, India has put the Indus River Water Treaty in abeyance along with other measures in the aftermath of the gruesome terror attack in Pahalgam. But Pakistan, instead of condemning this gruesome act of terror, has chosen to go a notch higher on the escalatory ladder by suspending the 1972 Shimla Agreement and also shutting down its airspace for Indian airlines. And in the United States of America, 100 days into the Trump presidency, there are fewer people who now believe that Donald Trump has the plan to make America great again. So as Trump's tariffs war threatens to push the United States of America potentially into a condition called stagflation. But let's of course start with the updates from India. The terror attack in Pahalgam has prompted India to take a pretty tough diplomatic stance against Pakistan. In addition to downgrading the already vulnerable bilateral ties, New Delhi has now suspended the key Indus Water Treaty between the two nations that has the potential to trigger an existential crisis for Pakistan. Let's take a look at the details of this treaty. The Indus Waters Treaty was signed in 1960. Now, following 9 years of negotiations between the two countries. Now, since then, it has survived 4 wars and also decades of tensions and hostility between the two nations. The treaty governs the flow of the Indus River system that includes the Indus and also its 5 left bank tributaries. And it allocates water from all eastern rivers of India's unrestricted use. It is important to note here that the term eastern rivers means the Satluj, the Beas and the Ravi combined. Now, Pakistan shall receive the waters from the western rivers. The term western rivers means the Indus, the Jhelum and the Chenab rivers. The treaty also gives India the right to generate hydroelectricity through projects that are generated on the western rivers. But it permits Pakistan to object to any Indian design on these hydroelectric projects. Now, suspending this treaty opens multiple options for India. In the absence of the treaty, India can in fact immediately stop sharing the water flow data with Pakistan. There will be no design or operational restrictions on India, and it can now create storage facilities on the western rivers as well. And it can also stop the visits by the Pakistani officials to the 2 hydroelectric projects as part of this treaty. Now, these projects also include the Kishan Ganga hydro project on the Kishan Ganga river, a tributary of the Jhelum, and the Ratle hydroelectric project on the Chenab river. It can also go ahead with the reservoir flushing of the Kishan Ganga project anytime. Under the treaty, reservoir filling after the flushing has to be done in August, that is the peak monsoon period. But with the pact now in abeyance, it can do so any time, at a time when it is summer. Reciprocating this move, Pakistan has of course said that it could suspend the crucial Shimla Agreement. Now, there's been a pivotal pact between the two sides since 1972. In the 53 years since this deal has been effective, the two nations have engaged in a full-blown war once, and that, of course, was in the Kargil conflict in 1999. Let's break down the 2 biggest provisions of the Shimla Agreement, which can potentially be impacted if Pakistan says, as it claims, that it has suspended it. Firstly, the agreement says that both countries are resolved to settle their differences by peaceful means, through bilateral negotiations or any other mutually agreed peaceful means. Secondly, according to the Charter of the United Nations, both countries will refrain from threatening and the use of force against territorial integrity or political independence of each other. Now, India's political parties are participating in multiple all-party meetings to explore an appropriate response as the standoff between the countries escalates further. All right, give us more updates in terms of what is happening at this moment between India and Pakistan in terms of this back and forth that is currently ongoing. My colleague Siddhant Sibbal is, of course, joining us with more updates. Siddhant, bring us up to speed with all this hectic diplomatic efforts that are currently underway India, of course, has put the Indus Waters River Treaty in abeyance, and Pakistan has responded by saying that they want to suspend the Shimla Agreement of 1972. What is Pakistan up to?
Well, yes, Pakistan in a statement has mentioned that it has the right to do so. It hasn't done so far, and it might be difficult for Pakistan to do so because essentially the line of control in Kashmir is something that has the sanctity because of the Shimla Agreement. So it might be difficult as of now, but it has been a long and hectic day here in Delhi and in Islamabad as well. Here in Delhi, the day started with the protest outside the Pakistani High Commission, and in a tit-for-tat move, we saw the protest outside the Indian High Commission in Islamabad as well. And of course, the big security committee meeting happened, and Pakistani side announced a slew of measures, almost all of them similar to what India has already announced in the aftermath of the Pahalgam terror attack. The only addition, a practical addition, was the closure of airspace for Indian aircrafts or India-owned aircrafts, and that means that longer duration for flights, Indian Indian carriers from India to rest of the world. That is the only new addition, but it looks like both sides have announced their diplomatic measures. What will be the next step? That's the big question. Will there be a strong military action by the Indian side? That is something that nobody knows. It is still in the realm of speculation. There have been a lot of social media chatter, but it is all speculation so far, and there hasn't been any comment by the Indian side over that. In fact, the Indian side earlier today in the day briefed the foreign envoys, almost 30 to 40 foreign envoys here in Delhi. Many of them, of course, from the G20 member countries, and talked to them about how Pakistan has been connected to terror attacks here in India. So there has been a diplomatic build-up. The big question is a military action is something that will be closely watched. India is a responsible power and it will weigh its option. And then there is the Pakistani trap as well. The Pakistani army chief, who is facing his own internal issues, would see it as an opportunity to save his own legacy as well. So there are a number of permutations and combinations, but so far this is a story that hasn't got over yet.
Absolutely, indeed. This story is definitely not over. Thank you very much, Siddhant Sibil, for joining us with all those updates there. All right, let's now shift our attention to the other big story that we are in fact tracking on WION. And this, of course, is from the United States of America, where the American president is nearing the 100-day mark of his second presidency. But the closer Donald Trump is getting to his milestone, the more his popularity seems to be falling. The latest poll by Fox News, this is his favorite news channel, that shows a clear downward spiral in terms of Trump's popularity, particularly on issues that are related to tariffs, economy and inflation. So let's take a quick look as to what the numbers say. Now, on the overall job performance, 53% of the people disapprove of what Donald Trump has in fact done, while 44% of the people still approve of the US president's work so far. On the economy front, a whopping 56% disapprove, as opposed to 38% of the Americans who still feel, 38% of the Americans who feel that Donald Trump is doing a good job with respect to the American economy. But 56% of them say that Donald Trump isn't doing the right thing. And this number, of course, keeps decreasing. When it comes to taxes, 53% disapprove, while 38% of the Americans still approve Trump's decisions. Now, Trump has in fact been pushing the US Congress to pass what he calls his one big beautiful budget bill, which includes tax cuts to curtail public spending. A similar pattern is also emerging on tariffs. 58%, that's a big number, 58% of the Americans disapprove of Donald Trump's global trade war, while 33% of the Americans believe that he has taken the right steps. So this is going to be interesting to see as to who these 33% of the people are who back Donald Trump's tariff war. Now, lastly, on inflation front, 59% of the Americans disapprove of what the US president is in terms of how he's handling this issue, while 33% of the Americans still back Donald Trump's performance on the question of inflation. The popularity rating has witnessed a greater downfall since the Republican leader first announced the tariffs on the 2nd of April. The decision triggered a market meltdown and the increased fears of a global recession. Now, shortly after Trump put a 90-day halt on the implementation, then singled out his fight with China, both countries have slapped retaliatory tariffs one after the other, and negotiations are still ongoing. The decrease in popularity had slowly begun after Trump signed an avalanche of executive orders to push forth with an institutional overhaul in the country and to undo several programs from the Biden era. However, Trump's popularity took a serious nosedive in the later weeks as the Trump cabinet is inching closer to its 100-day mark in office but remains embroiled in controversy, lawsuits and regular protests against the U.S. president. All right, now to tell us more in terms of what is happening in the United States of America with respect to Trump's popularity in the aftermath of his tariff war, we joined this broadcast by Ms. Adele Nazarian, who's a senior media fellow at the Gold Institute for International Strategy. Now, Ms. Nazarian, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on this broadcast. Donald Trump came with a promise that he wants to make America great again. He wanted the American people to have better incomes, a better standard of living. But his trade war seems to be pushing the United States of America in a completely different direction. There's been a market bloodbath. There is the prospect that stuff on the shelves of the supermarket will get very, very expensive in the days to come. But the economy itself could contract, pushing the United States of America into a stagflation. How convinced are you that Donald Trump is doing the right thing?
Great to be back on with you again. I think that we're going to see a lot of people hoarding products, canned goods, other goods, frozen items in preparation for a potential spike in the cost of food items. But I think everything is on track as planned. I think there is the risk and the likelihood of a recession is very high. I think it's increasing by the day as these tariff trade wars are increasing. Of course, we all know that the end user that will be most affected by the tariffs are the American manufacturers, the Americans who are actually distributing the goods. But I think that what Donald Trump is trying to do, President Trump is trying to do, is to mitigate the long-term effects of the economic recession. He's trying to make this a very brief, a very painful, quick transition, and hopefully it won't last for more than 6 months or a year. But I think that it's inevitable, and it's definitely going to hurt him at the polls right now, but I think that's going to change once again after.
In Trump, we believe, is what the Trump supporters will say. We'll, of course, have to see as to how long this pain will last. Thank you very much indeed, Ms. Adele Nazarian, for joining us with that perspective there.
Thank you.
All right, let's now shift our attention to the other big story from the United States of America, where the White House has been witness to another showdown between the U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and the tech billionaire Elon Musk. And according to an Axios report, the duo was involved in a loud and a pretty fiery argument inside the White House last week, and that too with President Donald Trump and other officials within earshot. Now, the scuffle occurred over a disagreement about who would head the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS. The reports now say that a war of words started in a meeting in the Oval Office and then it spilled out into the hallway. Both men reportedly were yelling loudly into each other's faces. Earlier, the New York Times had reported on disagreement between Bessent and Musk, but the extent of the argument was not publicized. A witness quoted in the report claimed that they were not physically in the Oval Office, but the president saw it and then they carried it down the hall and then did it again. Another witness claimed that they created quite a scene. The reason for the fight was Trump designated Gary Shapley, a Musk choice, as the acting IRS commissioner. This despite Bessent pushing pretty hard for an alternative Deputy Treasury Secretary, Michael Faulkender. The Bessent accused Musk of making some big promises about budget cuts through the Doge program, but failing to deliver. The Musk retaliated by calling Bessent a Soros agent and also mocking his past financial experience. This comes at a time when Musk has announced that he will be significantly scaling back his Trump administration work in the month of May to focus on Tesla, as the electric vehicle maker has reported a staggering 71% drop in the first quarter profits. Now, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump's former chief strategist, has called on Musk to make clear as to what fraud and waste have been uncovered in the federal government before he pulls back from his work from Doge. He's also demanded a letter of clarification showing that no one has taken any data from the Trump administration or the government. While Bannon has supported Doge's efforts, he's called Musk to be evil. All right, now to give us more updates on this story about the rift within Donald Trump's close aides and his cabinet, we're joined by our correspondent Susan Tehrani is joining us with more details on this. Susan, the fact that there were rifts within Donald Trump's close aide and his close cabinet was something that was being talked about a lot. But this seems to have clearly spilled out in a very big way, especially that showdown between Elon Musk and Besson. Tell us more what's happening and why is, someone like Steve Bannon asking Elon Musk to come clean on what he's actually uncovered was the waste that was there in the federal government.
You know, it's interesting about Steve Bannon. I'm glad you brought that up because Elon Musk on his government efficiency program website has everything listed that they've uncovered. It's pretty transparent. But it's interesting also because it seems Bannon and Musk are sort of on the same team as the ultra MAGA camp of the Trump administration. And then you have people like Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, and also Besant, who was in an argument with Musk. They're more moderates, they're more centrist Republicans, although they are also MAGA, but they also have that America First agenda, but sort of one is more extreme than the other, and it's just this tug of war. When Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, was asked about, these rumors about how wide this gap is between these individuals, she said that there's always disagreements in every cabinet and every administration, and it's completely natural for these people to butt heads like this. But nonetheless, it was interesting that Elon Musk, you said Gary Shapley, he was the IRS whistleblower against Hunter Biden. You may remember that. He testified on Capitol Hill. Of course, Besant wants someone that's, not so much politically associated to lead the IRS and help him in that regard. So, we'll have to wait and see which camp prevails. But as you mentioned, Elon Musk's 130 days as a special government employee is about to end in May. So he's not going to be around for much longer, at least to this extent.
Interesting. We'll have to see as to how Elon Musk's presence within the federal government and as a close aide of Donald Trump, of course, progresses from here. Thank you very much, Susan Tehrani, for joining us with those details then. All right, let's now shift our attention to Canada, where Canada will have its snap elections this Sunday. The front-runners for the prime ministerial post, the Liberal candidate Mark Carney and the Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, are making the final campaign push before the vote. So as we move closer to the big election day, let's in fact take a look at the issues that the Canadians say that they'll be voting on. In a recent poll conducted by the Canada-based research organization, the cost of living features in the top 3 issues for 72% of the respondents. Now, both the candidates are also focusing on Canada's response to the US president's tariff onslaught, and this has resonated by the people as well, with 49% of the people listing it as one of their 3 issues. Healthcare, economy and housing affordability feature as the key issues for 39, 32 and 30% of the respondents. So let's also take a look as to how the candidates are faring against each other. Polls show that Mark Carney is leading the Liberal Party to a 4th consecutive election victory. At this moment, as we speak, Mark Carney has a support of 42.7% of the people, while the Conservative candidate, Pierre Poilievre, is closing in with 38.3% of the support. Jagmeet Singh-led NDP has a backing of 8.3% of the people. Over 7 million Canadian voters have already cast their ballots in early voting. The 4-day window for early polling has closed, and the rest of the voters will now cast their mandate on the 28th. The Liberals and the Labour are the main contenders to form the government in Australia. The battle is on between the incumbent Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and the Liberal coalition candidate Peter Dutton. So let's take a brief look at the political careers of both frontrunners in Australia's race to power. Anthony Albanese joined the Labour Party as a teenager. It took him years to reach Australia's parliament when he was elected from Greenlander's seat in 1996. A decade into the parliamentary politics, he got a cabinet berth in the Kevin Rudd government in 2007. In 2013, Albanese was made the Deputy Prime Minister. In the same year, he unsuccessfully bid for the Labour leadership. Albanese finally became a Labour leader in 2019 and in 2022 clinched the prime ministership for the Labour camp after 9 years. Now, Albanese's challenger, Peter Dutton, is a policeman turned politician who first entered Australian Parliament on a Liberal ticket in 2001. He held several ministries under different Liberal governments from 2004 to 2017, including Health, Sports, Immigration and Home Affairs. And like Albanese, Dutton led an unsuccessful campaign for the party leadership in 2018. He was elected the party leader after the Liberals lost the 2022 election. While Albanese and Dutton had decades of political experience, polls show that Albanese has a sizable edge over Dutton. 48% of the voters prefer Albanese for the prime ministerial post, with just 37% backing Peter Dutton. Now, early voting is underway across Australia, with the final vote slated to be held on the 3rd of May. And more than 18 million people are registered to vote. The election body will take up counting as soon as voting ends. But in the case of a close contest, official results could in fact take days to be declared. Now, Jordan has announced a sweeping ban on the Islamist group, the Muslim Brotherhood. This could include shutting down the country's largest opposition party after accusing the Islamist group of planning attacks. The Interior Minister Mazen Al-Faraya has said that all of the Brotherhood's offices will be closed and its assets will be confiscated, and that any activities will be considered illegal. The ministry has said that it has been proven that members of the group operate in the dark and engage in activities that could destabilize the country. The ban comes a week after members of the group had been arrested on suspicion of planning attacks. Last week, Jordan said that it had arrested 16 Muslim Brotherhood members, saying that they were trained and financed in Lebanon and were plotting rocket and drone attacks on targets inside the kingdom. They were accused of manufacturing short-range missiles, possessing explosives and automatic weapons, concealing a ready-to-use missile, and also illegally recruiting and training people. The group has denied any links to the alleged attack plots. It is not clear as to how the ban will affect the group's political arm, the Islamic Action Front. Now, the IAF is the largest opposition group in Jordan's parliament after winning the most number of seats in last year's elections. However, the police raided the party's headquarters after the announcement of the ban and also seized several boxes of documents. Now, the IAF's Secretary General, Val Saha, has insisted that it is an independent political party, explaining that it had no relationship with any other organizational body. He said that they are committed to the law and the provisions of the Constitution, adding that he is surprised by the security services search of the group's headquarters. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood was founded in Egypt almost about 100 years ago and has local branches across the world. And one of its aims is to create a state ruled by the Islamic law, or Sharia. It is outlawed in Egypt and several Arab nations where governments see it as a clear threat. While the Second World War was nearing its end, France became one of the first European nations to grant women the right to vote. 105-year-old Marcel Abadi recalls the month 80 years ago when she first voted for the very first time in the French elections. Take a look.
When for the first time I was asked for my opinion, and in that moment, I existed. Before that, I was nothing. It left a lasting impact on me. I still think about it. Whenever people talk to me about voting, I always remember my first vote.
All right, let's also now take a quick look as to what else is making developments in the world of politics. Tanzania's main opposition leader, Tundu Lissu, is facing treason charges that carry the death penalty. Ahead of the Tundu Lissu court appearance in Dar es Salaam, the police detained the top opposition leaders en route to a protest rally organized in his support. The opposition has accused President Samia Suluhu of reverting to repression. Chadema has already been barred from the October elections after rejecting a disputed electoral code, fueling concerns over the democratic backsliding in the country. Romania's presidential race heats up as the pro-European contender Nicusor Dan calls for increased defense spending and stronger support for Ukraine. Nicusor is facing off against the centrist Crin Antonescu, the nationalist Victor Ponta and far-right frontrunner George Simeon. The rerun of the Romanian elections follows the annulment of the December ballot by the Constitutional Court due to allegations of Russian interference that Moscow has denied. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Race to Power. Thanks for watching.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the U.S.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of. A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA. Join the conversation.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here, in New York's Catskill Mountains, lies a luxurious place of healing called WION Wellness Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000 square feet of natural methods to manage diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, obesity, depression, anxiety, and other conditions. We use the traditions of centuries-old natural science from India, yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy in personalized programs that help you take charge of your own health. A minimum 5-day stay is recommended for best results. Book now at yo1.com.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@